Welcome to Your Redemptive Birth, the birth story podcast where we hear directly from women who have journeyed from medicalized births to natural ones. I'm Sarah, and together we'll hear from women who have reclaimed birth. Their stories are marked by healing, strength, and deep trust in their bodies. If these stories resonate with you, I'd love for you to follow the podcast and leave a review so more women can find hope here. And for more redemptive birth tips and encouragement, come connect with me on Instagram at Your Redemptive Birth. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not medical advice. Always consult your healthcare team for guidance specific to your pregnancy and birth. This is Your Redemptive Birth. Hi, all my lovely listeners, and welcome to Your Redemptive Birth. Welcome to the podcast, me. Today, I'm going to finally be sharing my birth stories, my two birth stories. I've given birth twice. I have two little boys. And I don't exactly know how this is going to go. I just want to kind of let it come. I wanted to let it flow. I just really want God to use my story however it might be helpful to other women. I always say that a woman tells her birth stories a little bit different every time, and sometimes things seem more important, and sometimes she realizes things she never realized before. So we'll see. We'll see what kind of happens tonight as I go through my birth stories. I'll take us back to my first pregnancy. My husband and I got married June 27th, 2020. So right in the beginning of COVID. And that was such a thing, right? We weren't even sure if we were going to be able to have our wedding. Like we'd had the wedding plan and everything for a year and a half. So there were so many mandates and so many law things that by God's grace, we ended up being able to still have our wedding just with like a limited guest list. And I think it was supposed to be 50 people, but I think we still had 70. And had the most beautiful, beautiful wedding that day. It was such a dreamy day. We got married in a beautiful Catholic church, and I'm Catholic, so that was really important to me, obviously, to get, receive the sacrament of marriage and start our life. So there's just something so firm about a Catholic marriage. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but I really wanted that. Like our wedding was it was magical. It was a beautiful day. So I'm Catholic, so we did natural family planning, right? And we were tracking my cycle, my fertility and everything. And I'd been practicing in the months leading up to our wedding. And I thought, I got the hang of this. We were doing the Creighton method, which is like a cervical cervical fluid tracking one. So you don't do anything but track your cervical fluid. And so we're like, 2 weeks in, I ovulate, like 2 weeks into our marriage. Like it's like the middle of July at this point. And I ovulate, we were choosing to abstain from sex during the fertile window because I didn't want to get pregnant right away. We were 22 and 23 when we got married. We were very young. And we were like, yeah, you know what? We were planning our move to Dallas because my husband was taking his first job out of college and we were going to move to Dallas. And we were like, yeah, we'll like wait a year maybe and we'll reevaluate and see how we're feeling and how ready we are to receive kids, right? But no, that first cycle, I got pregnant, and it was from one time, like 5 days or more. It was 5 to 7 days before ovulation. And we found out in August. So yeah, right. I was a couple days late and I was like, this is odd. And did a pregnancy test in my mom's bathroom because we still didn't have our own place yet. Like we were just married. We were packing up, getting ready to move down to Dallas. We're from the Midwest, and took this pregnancy test, and it was like a blazing positive, and we were shocked. And it took a minute for me to adjust and to like really, like, this is just not what I planned. Isn't that so sweet that we have plans, and then God comes in and changes it up. But of course I wouldn't change it for the world. And anyway, so I'm pregnant and I'm pretty nauseous right away around like 6-7 weeks. And we moved down when I was about 9 weeks. So we made the big move, packed some pods. We drove our car down, which is the very same 2006 minivan that we still drive today. So that's kind of just a fun thing to know. We settled into our apartment, and I'm just still kind of crazed that I can't believe that I'm pregnant. And even right away, I kind of felt this kind of knowing that, like, I didn't feel this really quick rush to go and get an appointment with a midwife or find a hospital, or I didn't know what I was going to do yet as far as the birth, but I knew we were moving, so I wasn't going to go and like see someone in our hometown and then go and have to transfer care and everything. So I was like, I'll just wait till we move down. And once we did, I started kind of shopping around. I considered a birth center there. I considered two birth centers actually, one home birth midwife, and then we ended up settling on this hospital midwifery practice. So all of the appointments were in this like really beautiful building outside of the hospital. So it was like a Victorian-ish kind of a house where all the appointments were, and then it was next to the hospital though. So that's where we ended. Like that's where the birth was going to be. Was in the hospital. And this was before I knew anything about the system. I didn't know anything about really. I didn't know anything about birth. I just was doing what what you're supposed to do, quote unquote, supposed to do, and what I'd heard of everybody doing. I was the very first one of any of my friends really to get pregnant, so I didn't really have anybody to talk to. I didn't have any positive like home birth or natural birth stories around me, but that was my intuition, was like, I'm going to have a natural birth. Those birth centers didn't quite feel right to me. And there was something comforting about the clinicalness actually of like this hospital midwifery group. And it was like quirky and cool. Like their office was really cool. And it felt like not super medical, but like medical enough. Like they wore scrubs and I knew I was going to birth in the hospital. So, I mean, obviously that's like really medical, but you know what I mean? How there's like this like cool midwifery aesthetic that like even hospital midwifery practices sometimes adopt. So it like feels like you're getting something different, but really it's just like hospital midwifery wrapped in a cuter package kind of. But that actually, it ended up feeling okay. So I've had my first actual appointment with a midwife not until I was 17 weeks. And again, something like my intuition was telling me like, what can anybody really do? Like, I'm healthy, I'm nauseous, I'm throwing up a lot. I was like, I'm just pregnant. What else is there to do? There isn't really anything to do, right? And so at that appointment, it wasn't a big deal. I didn't really know what to ask. I still wasn't really diving into birth yet or understanding what birth was going to like ask of me. My sister was at the time studying to be a labor and delivery nurse, and she is now. And so she was always sending me births. She was like trying to get me like into understanding birth, and like I did, like I wanted to understand birth, but watching birth was like really hard for me to do. It made me so tense. I was like, this is hard to watch. This is painful watching her get so big, and I couldn't do it. I did read a few books. I read the Bradley Method home birth book, the Susan McCutcheon Bradley Method book. I didn't really do much work beyond that. And obviously that ended up playing a big role in how my birth played out. So keep going through the pregnancy. Everything's fine. I didn't have any other kids yet, right? So and I was not yet a stay-at-home mom, but like just the homemaker of our little apartment. So I wasn't working. And I just found myself sitting on the couch a lot. Reclined on the couch, just like in creating that kind of back hammock where your baby kind of settles in that OP position that so many of us are familiar with nowadays. And I know that this is like a trendy thing to be worried to some people don't worry about baby position at all, and they just think it's kind of a hoax. Like they have witnessed OP babies come just as fast and normally as anterior babies. And so I just really wasn't even aware at that point about baby positioning or anything like that. But I knew that I was kind of letting him hang. I was letting my belly hang, was not maintaining my core strength or my core center balance. And I think that is really kind of important to how he kind of really settled into my womb there at the end of my pregnancy and stayed very persistently OP all the way through the birth and everything. He came out OP. And this made for a very long labor. So at least in my case, I know that that's not the case for everybody, but it was for me. I think that there were also a lot of other issues mentally, fear-based, just not really. Even I've noticed this too. I noticed I really had a lot of fear about becoming a mother at all. And I was really worried that I wasn't going to be a very good mother. And I was really worried that I wasn't going to be as good of a mother as my own mother. And I wasn't really aware of that yet. I kind of unpacked that after he was born. in the earliest weeks of postpartum, just everything, especially after kind of a challenging birth that left me really disappointed in my body and everything. So, okay. So why don't we just get into the birth? I go and I pulled out my notes too from the actual time so that I make sure that I get the timeline right. So how I wanted my birth to be, I wanted to have a natural birth in the hospital. I just didn't realize what it was going to require of me to actually do that. I didn't realize how much about birth physiology I didn't understand. I didn't realize how much of the system, of the hospital system that I didn't understand. So, okay, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but I knew kind of a baseline, which is I think where a lot of women come to their first birth. They think they know enough, but it turns out they actually don't. So 40 weeks, I lose my mucus plug at 4 a.m. and contractions start right away. And they're kind of coming 5 to 7 minutes apart consistently. And they just never stopped from ever since then. And they weren't, I remember that at 4 a.m, so contractions kind of started, and somehow I was awake and I was like so excited, and I couldn't go back to sleep. But I think from like 10 to noon, I ended up taking like a nap, and that was the last time I slept until he was born on the Thursday. This was a Monday, and he was born on a Thursday. So I took that nap. I woke up. Contractions just kept coming, and they were still mild at this point, but they were just really just consistent. Like they were, and I think that they were like about 30 to 45 seconds long every 5 to 7 minutes. And this type of a contraction pattern can actually be really like indicative of an OP baby. I didn't know that, but your uterus is trying to kind of like not force your baby down into the pelvis yet, but they're trying to get your baby to turn so that they are anterior. So those kinds of contractions that are a little bit, gentle, but definitely contractions and that consistent, but without any, movement down into the pelvis or cervical change. So that whole day kind of goes by. I work through the contractions, but they're not enough. Like they're taking all of my attention. So it was just like this day of contractions. So then I go into that night and I call I call my sister actually in the middle of the night at like 4 or 2 in the morning or something. And she miraculously answered. And I was like, Katie, I can't do this. Like, this is already so hard. And I didn't think that I wanted anybody else there. I thought I just wanted my husband to be there for the birth. But kind of after that day of early labor contractions, I felt really like I needed more support. And so I called her, but they're obviously in the Midwest, I just needed to cry to somebody, but I didn't think they were going to be able to make it, but they were already driving. My mom and sister are literally driving through the night because I guess they had a sense. They were like, we need to be there for her. Even if we aren't there for the birth, we're just going to go and stay at a hotel, and just so that she knows that we're near if she needs us, which I think is just so beautiful. And I love that I have such a wonderful, supportive mom and sister and family and everything like that. But they're driving through the night. I'm like, this is hard. Contractions are still like every 5 minutes, They get down to Texas at like 7 or 8 in the morning. They stayed on the phone with me the whole night while they drove. And then when they got there, they were exhausted, so they had to sleep. And so they kind of slept. I tried to lay down. The contractions are still coming. Like there's no rest. Like it was just early labor, really. And it just kept going. Then wait, I'm so sorry. I could not get this timeline right. So this must have been Wednesday at this point, Wednesday morning that they got there. So they drove down Tuesday through like down to the Tuesday, Wednesday night. And then now it's Wednesday. And, cause it gets so crazy and so trippy when you're contracting for days on end, but they get there, they have to nap. They hang out with me then when they wake up, and, I'm just laboring really, but it's still early labor. Like it's still contractions that are just, I don't know. My baby was so persistently OP that I don't think his head was applying enough pressure to my cervix to like open it. I really don't know. To this day, I don't really know. I think labor just takes a long time sometimes. But then I had my regularly scheduled appointment, how you see your midwife every week up until you give birth, like the later stages around 36, 37, 38 weeks. So I had my regular appointment and I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go to it. Like, what else can I do? So my husband takes me to that appointment later in the afternoon, and I asked for a cervical exam. Or no, she was like, well, do you want me to see what your cervix is doing? And I I was like, yeah, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm contracting for days and I haven't slept and I don't know what to do. And so she texts me and I have the note here, but I remembered her saying 1. Like, you're not open at all. So you're 1 centimeter and then 50% effaced, -1 station, soft cervix. And cool. All right. So that was really discouraging. It was like all of this and like nothing, quote unquote, nothing is happening. But here's the thing is my cervix could have changed super fast. I don't think it has to do with the cervix. I think that that's a thing that we fixate on, but I really don't think that that the cervix really matters. You'll see that in my next birth story. So I'm super discouraged. We go home. It's like 5 p.m. And the second we walk through the door, my water broke. Like a big movie theater gush, like a big, how it is in the movies, a big gush just pours out of me. And I was wearing this big cotton dress, but I don't think when I was wearing underwear. So I'm just like, I pour water everywhere, all over our apartment floor. And I started crying right away. And my mom and sister were there. My mom just hugged me. She's like, oh, it's okay. You're going to give birth. You're going to have this baby. And, but I was encouraged. I was encouraged then that my water broke, because then it was like, okay, this actually, something is happening. But in hindsight, I'm like, whoa, I just had a cervical exam 30 minutes ago and then my water broke. Like, like the math is mathing. Like, I just think that sometimes cervical exams, it's not uncommon for them to accidentally break waters when they do them. So I don't know if that was what happened, if my water was going to break anyway, or if she was just a little too, rough with my poor little cervix. I'm not really sure, but something to keep in mind, I guess. But my water broke, and after that it started to get really intense, and it's good. Finally, it started to feel like they were getting more intense, even closer together. Now they were like 2 to 3 minutes apart contractions, which I was really in my head timing them. And my sister started to time them. So I started to think a lot less about that. But honestly, it's not ideal to be timing your contractions while you're in labor. That's so like the opposite of what you should be doing, because you want to let your brain just go offline. You don't want to be in your thinking brain. It does not help labor to work well. And so constantly timing contractions, constantly worrying that you're not opening, constantly kind of anxious and unable to like visualize your baby coming out of you, like all of that isn't going to actually help labor work well. And so anyway, I keep laboring. I remember I was on my hands and knees in my bedroom. I was kind of holding onto a towel on the back of the door in my bathroom. That was kind of nice for a while. I was sitting on the toilet. I was getting in the shower. And I think I only labored at home like that for a couple of hours before my mom and sister just, they were ready to take me in to the hospital, because I think what we all thought was that you go to the hospital to give birth, and not thinking about how the hospital transition would affect my labor pattern, or was it still too soon? So, so we go to the hospital. I threw up in the parking garage of our apartment. Like, these were all good signs that it was time to go. I was throwing up. My contractions were every 2 to 3 minutes. My water was broken. We were like, okay, well, let's go. So we get in, and I just remember the labor nurse that we got was like fine. She was fine, but she didn't really believe me that my water had broken, which I think is the experience of a lot of women who go in. They just kind of don't believe you until they get that positive amniotic fluid swab test. And so I consented to a cervical exam, hoping that things were changing, because I still had this fixation on the cervix in my head. And I know so many women do. And I knew that in my head, I knew you could decline cervical exams, but in practice, it's actually a lot harder. And the way that they frame it and word it was, she was like, all right, like, it's time to do a cervical exam. And I'm 24, I'm not used to the medical setting. I've never even really set foot in a hospital. Like, I was talking about this on Victoria's podcast, Whole Birth Wellness. I was talking about this last week. I was talking about how I had, praise the Lord, never really had any need to go to a hospital. So it was really, really shocking to go, and that environment shift was huge for me. And the fluorescent lights and the strangers, I didn't realize how much it was going to affect me, that obviously your nurses are strangers. Like you've never met them before, but they admitted me right away because she was like, okay, I guess your waters have broken. Now I believe you. After she'd gotten a positive, or no, I don't know. I don't think she got actually a positive test. I think that she fingered me again, obviously, cervical exam, and more water came out. I think that's how it went. And so then she was like, okay, yeah, now I believe you. Yeah, your water's okay. She's ruptured, Then also the continuous fetal monitoring. Again, in my head, I knew that you could decline that. But in practice, she was so annoyed by the fact that I said, no, I don't think I want to do that. She was like, no, it's hospital policy. And my old people pleasing self was, didn't want to make her mad or have to get anybody else involved. So I was like, okay, yeah, I can just strap these monitors on. She said it had to be for like 30 minutes so they could get like a good contraction pattern or something. And of course they kept falling off. So then she had to come back every few minutes and adjust them. It was just stupid. It was just like so annoying. Now, obviously I know that intermittent monitoring is just as effective for low risk moms and babies. So anyway, I consented to the continuous fetal monitoring for that 30-minute increment or whatever. And it was impossible to labor. Like she had me sitting up in that bed with the monitors on. It was so much harder to move through those contractions stuck in that bed that way. Finally, I must have been like said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Maybe it was the 30 minutes were up. It was so odd. I don't know. But then I remember starting to kind of labor. I went to the bathroom a few times because the toilet was really helpful. It must have been, I don't know for sure the timeline, but we checked into the hospital around 7 p.m. And by the time I saw one of my midwives, it was like 11 p.m. And she asked if she could do another cervical exam. I said yes. And I was still 1 centimeter open. And after, this is the third day of labor, of those kinds of early labor contractions. And then obviously my water broke, then it got a lot more intense. But I was starting to feel so defeated and so deflated and so discouraged hearing that I was still not opening. And so she kind of gave me an ultimatum in a weird way. She was like, look, your waters are open. The hospital policy says, that we can only quote unquote let you continue to labor like this for so long. Gonna have to start Pitocin at some point, pretty much is what she said. And like, it's going to get more intense with the Pitocin and, an epidural is an option. Like she pretty much just like laid it out like that. And I was just so done. I was just so done. And I was like, I'm not opening. Like, I don't know. I guess my body is just not working. Like my body doesn't know how to labor. All these lies start permeating every fiber of your being, which is, I know the story of so many women. And so as soon as I got the Pitocin, I got the epidural right away. And I had a trauma-free epidural experience. Praise the Lord. My son handled all of that Pitocin, like a champ for, it was about 12 or so hours. Like by the time the Pitocin and epidural were started, it was around like 12:30 or 1 in the morning, I think. And then he was born at 1:30 p.m. the next day. So 12 hours of that kind of in the bed with an epidural, flipping sides with a peanut ball. Like the nurses came and flipped me pretty often actually. And I think that was helpful. And I know some women don't have nurses who are constantly flipping them, which once you can't move anymore, like you need to manufacture that movement somehow because your pelvis, a baby moving through a static pelvis is like just hard to do. It's not physiological. So, but he stayed persistently occiput posterior OP the whole time and came out that way. And interestingly, my mom also gave birth to me and my 2 siblings. We were all 3 sunny side up babies. We were all OP. And I thought, maybe this is just the way that our bodies labor. I don't know. Maybe this is something about our pelvis that our babies come through this way. I don't know. I was 10 centimeters dilated around like actually 11 or 12 a.m. or 11 a.m., 12 p.m., like right around lunchtime-ish. And she was like, well, do you want to start pushing? And I was like, actually, I'm like still exhausted because I finally was able to sleep, with the epidural. But I still was tired and I wanted to rest a little bit more before pushing. And she was like, yeah, all right, sounds good, And I'm so glad that we did that because that's called laboring down. You just let your body, you let the Pitocin keep pumping your uterus and let your, baby just keep coming down without actually pushing. And he was tolerating all of that well, which I know that that's not the story for so many women. An epidural and Pitocin does not work, or it works, but like their baby doesn't handle all of that very well. But his heart tones were fine and everything was fine. So I didn't start pushing around like until like 1 or so in 1 p.m. And he came out in just a few pushes. I mean, straight OP baby with an epidural, he still came out in just a few pushes, just a few contractions. And I'm so thankful because I know some women have an OP baby and their provider, their OB or their midwife is like, oh my gosh, like this OP baby, like it's going to be hard. It's going to be like, just everybody get ready. Like, and they really scare women into thinking that their bodies aren't going to be able to do it. And she did not do that at all. She was so supportive. And she was like, she didn't say anything about baby positioning at all, even though we all knew that he was OP, but she wasn't scaring me or making me worried. And I've just heard so many women say that the doctors and midwives sometimes have really, really scared them. And I'm so grateful because that was not my story. I pushed him right out because there wasn't a bunch of fear around his position around me. And yeah, his skull was molded into the craziest shape to fit through my pelvis that way, which is wild that babies' heads can do that. And so that's why my labor took so long, was because his head was just molding into this insane shape to fit through my pelvis. And he had like this big knob on the side of his head. If you can, just Google like OP baby, like skull shape, because it's pretty wild. And my husband looked so scared when he first saw him. My sister always laughs about that. And yeah, so that was the first birth. I felt really sad that it didn't go the way I'd hoped, that it wasn't a natural, undisturbed physiological birth, because I wanted that instinctively, but I didn't actually know how to do that or what it was going to require of me or what my environment needed to be in order for that to happen. And so breastfeeding was a really rough start. I had a really rough start to breastfeeding, and I really attribute that to all the Pitocin and the epidural. I know that when you mess with your hormones, you mess with physiology, that really impacts your body's ability then to just switch gears into into lactation, into milk production. I know that so many women struggle with breastfeeding after that too. It took like 4 or 5 days or was something for my milk to actually come in. And was it was awful because he was fussy. I was crying. It was such a hard thing to wait. And I know so many women just don't. They like see their baby crying and they're like, I must be starving my baby. How do I know my baby's getting enough? And then they, and the pediatrician, of course, with the weight loss thing, he had gotten up to like 8.5% of his body weight that he'd lost at a couple days postpartum. And so the pediatrician scared me and she was like, give him formula. Thank goodness my mom and my sister were so supportive, and they were like, just give it a little bit more time. Like, it's going to be okay. And it was. And I never gave him that formula. And I'm so glad I didn't, because that would have affected my milk supply. And yeah, so I went on to nurse him for a long time up until even through my next pregnancy, he continued to nurse. But that I think also was something that really rebuilt my belief in my body's ability to birth, because I thought I figured out breastfeeding. Like, my body did end up knowing how to do that. I almost thought it didn't, but it did. And I felt so such a really deeply connected to my womanness, to my femininity in the breastfeeding journey with my first son. And I feel like I'm getting a little long-winded here, so maybe I will just start going on into the second birth or the second pregnancy and birth. But yeah, just the way that I was able to nurse him really, really, it strengthened my belief in myself again. And because for a while I really struggled with my body just didn't open. Like, I don't know why my body just wouldn't work. My body didn't know how to do labor. And I totally blamed myself and my body for not working when I was not at all taking into consideration the environment that I chose to put myself in, chose to give birth in. And who knows how it might have played out if I had just had a home birth midwife and I continued through that early labor phase and just who knows? We can't know. But I think that that's the case for so many women, is that they blame their body. They think that something is wrong with them, and they don't understand that it had a lot to do with the system and the environment. or their support or lack of support or their lack of education around what birth physiology actually is. And so, yeah, so going into it took me a long time to feel ready to get pregnant again. I say a long time. So it was like my son was like 2 and 9 months or so, like a few months away from turning 3 when I um, felt ready to be pregnant again. I felt finally ready for another baby. And I got pregnant that very first month that we tried. And that was amazing. I know that's not everybody's story either, but I'm so grateful for that. And yeah, so my pregnancy, I knew I wanted it to be different. I knew I wanted my birth to be different. I had met friends at this point now who had had home births and who believed in natural birth and all that. And, I was kind of pregnant at the same time as one of my friends who was planning her home birth too. So that was really encouraging. And I was just going down this super deep dive rabbit hole of the natural birth thing. And also like ancestral nutrition too was a big part of it. Really, really nourishing my body well and intentionally. I was a vegetarian up until for 3 years before I got pregnant with my first baby. And so I kind of went into his pregnancy like super depleted, honestly. I hadn't had meat in 3 years. And like, gosh, I just can't even believe I did that because now meat and just so many animal products are like the staple foods for me and for my family. So yeah, I just really nourished myself differently that pregnancy. Everything at this point in our lives was grass fed, organic, pasture raised, the whole 9 yards. And it was a slow process. It took like a couple of years to really get there. Raw milk, all that. We were just doing all of the ancestral nutrition things, taking beef liver. And not that of course, I don't recommend anybody do your own research and decide what's right for you, but don't change anything before talking to your healthcare team. But for me, this was definitely the right thing. So I started interviewing midwives. Again, I talked about this on Victoria's podcast as well, but I just didn't feel a soul connection with anybody. I interviewed like all of our area home birth midwives because I knew I wanted a home birth. And I really wanted them to feel like a wise grandmother kind of a feeling, like like I just wanted to feel like a soul connection or like a best friend connection or like a nice wise aunt connection. And I just never felt that. And also it's a huge investment for a home birth midwife. It was like going to be like $4,000, $4,500. And obviously I like I know it's a lot about how we prioritize money, right? And but financially that was like a big stretch for us to do. And I felt like what was I paying for? I knew I wanted a pretty undisturbed birth. And the more I learned about birth physiology, I also took a doula course at around like 13 weeks pregnant with him. I took a doula training with Wapio from the Matrona. This course was really great for actually really deeply understanding physiology and what actually happens hormonally and like the way the baby moves through the pelvis and all of this. It was really eye-opening, and I just understood birth in a totally new way. And I understood how important it was for it to be undisturbed. I knew that that was like so core, was to feel private, to feel safe. I'm a very private person anyway. Like the thought of being naked around anybody but my husband like stresses me out. Like that, I didn't want that. And so the more I interviewed the midwives, the more I learned about birth, I was like, well, what am I paying them for if I don't even really want them near me? Of course it's for an emergency or whatever, right? But I just believed so deeply in my body's ability to birth. I felt so faithful and sure in my body and in my baby. And I just felt like, well, I guess I'm just going to free birth. Like I kept going week by week and I was like, I'm not liking any of these midwives really. And I trust my body. So why don't I just free birth? Like, honey, Caleb's my husband. Like we're just going to do this. It's going to be okay. And I don't think that that's the right choice for everybody. It was definitely the right choice for me. And I had such a peaceful pregnancy, really. I had one ultrasound at 20 weeks because my sister said that I looked huge. So I went to like a little boutique ultrasound place in our area and got an ultrasound just to make sure that there weren't twins, because there is a set of twins in our family. And so no twins. It was just one little baby in there. Yeah. So I never had like a Doppler on my womb the whole time. I bought a fetoscope. I bought my own fetoscope and I listened. It was such a joy to listen to my own baby's heart. Um, when I finally could, because I had an anterior placenta, which I also knew because I was checking with fetoscope. So I knew exactly where my placenta was because of the way it sounded with the fetoscope. It was really like muffled everything in the front. And so I didn't hear his heart until heck of a lot later. I want to say it was like late second trimester, like early third trimester with a fetoscope. And I just trusted that he was okay. I trusted that everything was fine, and it was. And that was great to not have to go anywhere for appointments. It was great to not have to. I never did a GBS swab. I did take my own blood pressure. My blood pressure was fine the whole way through. Like, was nourishing myself while I was chasing after my, 3-year-old at this point. I was active, and I was just joyful and easy. Pregnancy felt so actually easy and joyful that way. I was listening to birth stories nonstop. And that is really why I started this podcast, is because I kind of felt like I have to pay it forward, because birth stories were the medicine for me. I listened to the Natural Birth podcast. So it's Anna. She calls herself the spiritual midwitch. Again, a little new agey for my taste now, but I still love the way she talks about birth. I love the way she approaches birth. She's an ex-midwife. She's great. I highly recommend that podcast if you want to be, for more natural birth. She's the Natural Birth podcast. So it's just really great for priming your brain. Something happens, something shifts when you're constantly listening to these positive, beautiful stories. And you start to think, if she can do it, like, why can't I? And then especially the encouraging stories to me were ones that sounded a whole lot like mine, like, cascade of interventions, standard American hospital birth, Pitocin epidural situations, maybe OP. That was always encouraging to hear someone have a natural birth after that, after having an OP baby. Because that was like still my biggest hurdle. I was like, I'm going to have a malpositioned baby and I'm going to have a week-long labor again. But thankfully, that is not how the story plays out. Oh, the other thing is I saw a chiropractor weekly, bi-weekly up until 20 weeks, and then weekly from 20 weeks and on, or something like that. And highly, highly recommend chiropractic care. It kept me so just supple and mobile and no pain. I felt so comfortable that whole pregnancy. And my baby was beautifully positioned. And I also think I attribute that to the way that I held my core. I wasn't afraid to like still use my core muscles in a way that I had been kind of afraid to in my first pregnancy. And I think that was so key to how he ended up kind of the position he found in my womb. And yeah, it was such a straightforward, beautiful pregnancy, really. I'm still nauseous. I was a very nauseous pregnant person. I always am until about 17, 18 weeks. But after that, it was great. And I'm really hoping that's different the next time that I have a baby. We'll see. But so yeah, I'm 39 and let's see, 39 and 3 or 39 and 4. I can't remember. 39 and 3 or 39 and 4. When my water broke, and I was actually listening to a birth story, and I was finishing up the last freezer meal that I had on my list, because I was like stocking my freezer full of freezer meals, right? For postpartum. Like, as I'm pulling the meatballs out of the oven of my very last thing that I had to check off my to-do list, I felt my water break. And the podcast I was listening to was this woman telling her birth story. And she was talking about how for her water never breaks right up until the moment of birth. And she said that. She was like, my water never breaks right up until the moment of birth. And that's when my water broke. So it's just so weird, so crazy. And what it felt like to me was like, it felt like a grapefruit sized amount of water. Like, imagine like a grapefruit sized amount of water, and just like kind of like a floppy water balloon, kind of grapefruit sized, and you just like nick it with a needle, and it just kind of globbed out. Like, water just kind of globbed into my leggings and my underwear that I was wearing. And I knew immediately what it was. I knew that it was my water. And I went to the bathroom, and I sat there, and I like wiped a little, and there was just a teensiest tinge of pink and water. Amniotic fluid smells like semen. And so it did. My water smelled like semen. I was like, okay, so it really is. And I immediately like started to cry. I just had this emotional release right then. And I cried, and I talked to my baby, and I was like, baby, like, you're going to be here so soon. It's okay. You can come whenever you want to come. I'm ready for you. I'm here for you. I'm ready to receive you. I'm ready. If you're ready. When you're ready, I'm ready, right? And I knew that there was no rush for contractions to start from listening to Anna from the Natural Birth podcast. The risk of infection is what people are concerned about when your waters are open for like an extended period of time. But what increases the risk of infection is having you guessed it, a whole lot of hands inside your vagina. So cervical exams increase your risk of infection. And as long as, I didn't ever feel feverish and the water was clear, there was no meconium. I felt fine. So I felt very safe in just kind of waiting for contractions to start. And they didn't start right away. So that was at about 7 p.m. when my water broke. I think it was 6:36 was when my water broke. And then my husband was out with my toddler at the time. They had gone to the store or something. And I was just cooking dinner and they came back. I didn't even tell my husband right away because I didn't want to start this alert process. I just wanted to kind of let my body do its thing. But I did tell him around 9 or 10 that night. I was like, yeah, it's like my water broke. Like we're going to have this baby soon ish. Sometimes women don't have contractions for a few days. Isn't that wild? And so I was ready for that. I was like, okay, contractions might not start for a while. Like I'm just ready to wait. We got my son to sleep and then I was just kind of restless. I was really trying hard to rest though and go to sleep because I knew from my last experience how exhausting labor could be. I was like really preparing myself for a super long labor again. I was like, okay, we need to sleep. We need to rest. So I tried, but then I couldn't really sleep very well. But then my son woke up around like 1 or 2 in the morning and I went in and kind of like resettled him. And I remember feeling annoyed that he woke up because I was like, I don't want him to wake up a bunch of times and like try and be in labor. And so I was starting to get stressed out, but I had to stop. I had to press pause, and I got him back to sleep. And I think that oxytocin of snuggling your baby back to sleep, that helped because after I got him back to sleep, I went back to my room and, I felt my first contraction and they were pretty strong right off the bat. I remember trying to lay back down and just see if I could go back to sleep even with some mild contractions, but they weren't mild enough to do that. They were really strong and it felt so good to stand next to my bed. So I stood next to my bed and kind of just like rocked back and forth with my eyes closed. It was very dark in our room. Obviously all the curtains closed and it was the middle of the night. And I just stood there and contracted I don't know, wasn't timing anything. I didn't want to be in my head thinking about timing. There was nobody to call because I wasn't having a midwife. I was just be in labor, and I loved that. I loved how just like there was no stress. There was nothing to do but just labor. And so I did. So I just stood next to my bed, just kind of swaying. And that time passed in the blink of an eye. Before I knew it, some sun was starting to peek behind the curtain. And I knew, okay, it must be like 6 or 7 in the morning. Like the sun's coming up. And it was so distracting. I remember how distracting it was to see even just a smidge of light behind that curtain. My brain was like, no, like I do not want that. And so I also was close to our bathroom, is next to our bedroom. So I would go and sit on the toilet, have some contractions there. I pooped a lot, like a lot of loose stools came out. That's birth, right? Like your body's clearing everything out. And I would get in the shower. I would stand in the shower for a bit and then go stand next to my bed again and then go to the toilet, shower, bed. And I just kind of like passed a couple hours in this little loop going around. And by this point, I was really starting to get kind of vocal. So it's like, this is from 7 a.m. to like 9 a.m. ish, if I had to put some time frames around it. That was that time. And it's definitely starting to get really intense. I'm vocalizing a lot. I remember I think I was starting to scare my son a little bit because he was waking up and he was starting to hear it and he was like, what's going on with mommy? And I tried to like prep him with what birth kind of sounds like. So we practiced making birth sounds or something, animal sounds, beforehand so that he would maybe not be so scared. But, yeah, I could tell he wasn't like thrilled. It was stressing him out to see me like this. And I was like butt naked, just kind of, and I had my robe. I would get sometimes, when you're in labor, like you get hot and then you get cold. So I'd like put on my robe if I was cold and then I would get hot. So I'd take it off in and out of the shower. And I threw up a couple of times. I threw up in the shower. I threw up in the toilet. Like every sign is indicating that we are heading close to birth. Right. And I know my baby's not OP. I know he's beautifully positioned. So, okay. So my son's getting a little scared. So I think, okay, let's tell my parents I'm in labor and let's have him go over to my mom's house. So that's what we did. My mom, I think, I don't know if it was my mom or my stepdad, but I think my mom came and picked him up, brought him back. I'm just there with my husband and I'm starting to hit a wall. Like I'm starting to think like, this is hard. Like this is intense. The same fear was coming back from my first birth. Like I was thinking, I'm not opening. I'm not opening and this is going to be another 3-day labor and I can't do it. silly me, who was I to think that I could do this? This is insane. And I was like, take me to the hospital. I want to get an epidural. Like, I can't do this. And my husband was so sweet. And he was like, no, like, no, honey, like, no, that's not what you really want. You sure? Like, no, come on, really? And we called my sister. I was like, Katie, I can't do this. My sister's name is Katie. And she's like, Sarah, like, we all know what this means. When you start saying you can't do this, it means you're almost there, right? We all know this. I know this. You know this. But I just was so in my head about it. And I tried to do my own cervical exam. And I even tried to have my husband do a cervical exam. And my cervix was really thin. So it was very thin, but I was like sure that it was not open. But in reality, I'm pretty sure I was feeling the top of my baby's head. And maybe I was a couple centimeters open. Maybe I was more than that. I don't actually know. And I was like, Caleb, take me in. I want an epidural. So it was so hard to get into the car. So if anybody is actually planning like a natural hospital birth, that's the right time to get in the car and go, is when it's so hard to get there. I was like not in it was everything in me to like get a pair of pants on. I put flip-flops on. It's like late October in the Midwest. So it's like chilly. All I could do was like get on this weird sweatshirt, some weird pants, and some flip-flops because my brain is offline in labor land, like full on. And getting out to the car was so crazy, so hard. Finally, like it took me 10 minutes just to get through a few contractions just to get to the car. And I obviously wasn't timing contractions at all anymore, but my sister timed a couple on the phone with my husband, and he was kind of timing them, and they were all well over a minute long, like long contractions every 2 to 3 minutes or something. Like they were really close together and really intense and really long and strong. And so we get finally in the car. That car ride was so hard. Thank God we live like only like 7 minutes from the hospital. So we get there, we get into, triage. It's such a silly thing. So silly because I'm literally, little do I know, I'm about to have this baby, right? And so we get into triage. The labor nurse that receives us there was so kind. It was a man. He was very sweet and super gay and very comforting to me because I was so sure I'm not opening. And I wanted a cervical exam. And he said, well, honey, you're not nothing. I don't know how he said it, but he said, you're not nothing. You're like 5 centimeters open, 100% effaced, and +3 station. And I knew what all that meant because I had done a bunch of birth research. Obviously I should mention I had prepared because I was preparing for a free birth, right? So I knew all the emergencies. I knew, when would be genuine, like a cord prolapse or like a signs of an abruption or of a uterine rupture. Like these are real emergencies. I knew what those might look like. And I would have taken myself to the hospital had we had one of those. But obviously I took myself to the hospital because I just thought I wanted an epidural, right? But I was fully aware of what to expect in a hospital. I was so, ready to navigate the system. I knew what I was going to accept and what I wasn't if that did happen, if I went into a hospital. So again, this is like such a crucial piece of the puzzle. If you're planning a natural hospital birth, there's so much that if you just do the research and know and understand, your confidence in your body's ability and your confidence in your ability to say no is so different because there's no there's no dissonance. There's no maybe I'm doing the right thing, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing, because if you've done the research, then you can feel so sure in whether you do things or don't. You know what you are signing up for when you've done the work, right? But anywho, so when I heard him say that I was 100% effaced +3 station, I didn't even care so much about 5. I was like, whoa, like my cervix is super thin and like I'm opening. This is working. I'm clearly in active labor. My waters are open. Like I actually am going to have this baby really soon. And how amazing that our mind can make that little switch, because what if I had heard all of that and thought, I'm only 5 centimeters. Like, oh my gosh, I must still be 5 hours away, because the myth is that, right, that we open 1 centimeter an hour. This is not true. This is a literal myth. And how many times have I heard women be for 3, 4, 5 centimeters and then pushing their baby out shortly after? This is not uncommon. I've heard this too many times now to think that cervical change matters, really. Like it's just a tiny piece of the puzzle. It is not everything. So I'm in full-blown active labor, even though according to, I think, recent guidelines now, 6 centimeters is active labor. okay, whatever. But my mind, it shifted my mind. So that is like, that was the one cervical exam I've ever had that was actually helpful. All the other ones for my first birth just deflated and discouraged me. That one, I was like, oh, okay, like I actually can do this. And like, it's all about your mindset. If you think that you can do it, then you will. If you don't think you can do it, then you probably won't. So all of a sudden now I have this belief in myself, like maybe I actually can. And with each surge, with each contraction, I'm still like moaning to my husband and my mom who are with me, I want an epidural. And for some reason that was so relieving to say, like, I want an epidural. This is hard. It hurts, you know. But all I could get out was I want an epidural. When you're in real active labor, you're doing one word answers to things. Yes, no. I mean, my eyes were closed. I'm hardly able to, there's no conversation happening, right? Like, so anyway, so they did admit me, right? I finally get up to a room, and after I'm finally in this quiet room, and I did have an IV because they'd given me the fluids in case I did actually want the epidural, right? And also, honestly, I think the fluids maybe were good for me. They rehydrated me a little bit because I'd thrown up so many times at home before before going. And so the fluids actually, I think maybe gave me a little boost of energy or something. But the nurse that I had was like, meh, whatever. She was fine. But she left, she was in and out maybe a couple of times over, I don't know how long. This is all such a blur, but I know that shortly after getting into the room, the hospital room, I started actually to feel the urge to push. I remember feeling so relieved when I finally felt the urge to push because I hadn't felt that at all with my first birth. And it was so exciting. It gave me this newfound little burst of energy. And I think that again, that's also physiological. You get kind of like a burst of adrenaline when pushing out your baby kind of starts to happen. And so I like zapped back into life a little bit. And I was so relieved to feel that sensation. And I remember saying to my mom and my husband, I'm pushing, don't tell anyone. That's all I could say. And then after every contraction, I would say, I want an epidural. And that was just my like little coping strategy, I guess. But I said, I'm pushing, don't tell anybody. And I knew I was safe. I knew so much. I never once through this whole thing, never did I think I was in danger or that he was in danger, my baby. I thought, this is too much. Like, I can't do this. So I want an epidural. But I never thought anything was wrong. Like, I knew he was okay. I knew I was okay. It was just really, really hard. It was really hard. Birth is hard. Like, at least in my experience, birth has been hard so far. I'm open to the idea of having like a pain-free, ecstatic, blissful birth. But so far, birth has been painful and hard for me. And so I'm finding the same position that I was in next to my bed at home, where I was just kind of leaning onto my bed a little bit, leaning forward onto my bed. And my mom actually suggested, she was like, why don't you like squat down a little bit, like move your hips a little bit more, like you need to move a little bit more. Cause I was kind of frozen, like next to the bed, standing kind of static. I'm grateful that she did that. And that's the kind of the beauty of having a good support person or a doula or mom or your husband, who little suggestions like that. I mean, cause I'm all about like not disrupting a woman. She's in her space. Like, she knows what to do to get this baby out. Right. But that little suggestion was actually quite helpful. And it reminded me, oh yeah, like I forgot actually, like motion is lotion. Like, I gotta move. I gotta get this baby. Like, we're working together. Right. And, I'm pushing, don't tell anyone. I didn't want the whole crowd of people to come in and observe me and watch me while I push, because of course, like we're mammals. And so that wouldn't have felt safe to me, mammalian me, birthing. I didn't want any hands poking and prodding me. So, I was trying to push really quietly. So I wasn't using like a whole bunch of noise yet. I mean, there came a point where there was kind of no stopping it, but I was really trying to push quietly because I didn't want a big flood of people coming in. And how sad is that? Like, I just want to acknowledge for a second, like, women shouldn't have to feel like they have to be quiet giving birth, right? I'm pushing. I actually pushed for about, I think, 35 or 40 minutes before he was finally born. But somewhere in there, maybe 15 minutes in, I reached in and I could feel the top of his head. I could only reach in my finger, maybe up to like the second knuckle, of my index and middle finger. He was right there. He was just like a half a finger's distance inside me. And wow, how crazy to feel my baby's head right there. Like, it was insane. It was just insane and beautiful. And I felt like such a relief knowing that how close he was. I was starting to finally believe again. My body knew what to do. My body was doing it. We were doing it. Like, I didn't need anything. I didn't need any of the Pitocin. I didn't need the epidural. Like, I was just birthing my baby. So I kept pushing. And then finally, as he was crowning, I felt the ring of fire. And my mom and Caleb, my husband, always laugh. And they're like, it's the ring of fire. Because apparently that's how I said it. I was like, it's the ring of fire. Because, when you're pushing, it's like this, like, force that's just, your body is pushing so hard. It's insane, the amount of force, but that's literally what my voice sounded like. It's the ring of fire. And again, I didn't feel scared of that. I felt relieved. I felt like, wow, my body is doing it. Like, my baby is so close. And it burnt for like that contraction. And then it didn't. It just, my tissues really were stretching. And had been eating all that collagen, all that protein, all of those animal products. I mean, my tissues were supple and ready to stretch. And it did. My perineum beautifully stretched. And I'm kind of in like a one knee down squat next to the bed, kind of holding onto the bed, one knee on the ground, one knee up, like a lunge-ish kind of, like a lunge. And as he's crowning and it's the ring of fire, I just roar, do a big, intense roar, right? I always say a big, magnificent roar. And when I finally roared like that, obviously the whole crew of people floods in from the hallway because they heard me. And like the OB is like throwing on this gown. I don't know, because I just know from pictures, but I couldn't see. They all came in behind me. And the OB came up behind me and I said, get this baby out of me. So I know I said that. I said, get this baby out of me. But what I wasn't really asking for her, the OB, to pull the baby out of me. I was just working through getting my baby out of me. Do you know what I mean? But to be fair, I did say, get this baby out of me. So she comes up behind me and kind of pulls him out. And my husband is right next to me. Again, I said this in Victoria's podcast, but like, praise God, he never ever let all the flood of nurses like beat him to me. Like, no, he stayed right next to me, right behind me the whole time. And I also laugh because while I was pushing that whole time, my husband was right behind me, like ready to catch, because we were thinking, okay, like this baby's coming soon. And I always laughed because of, a month ago, maybe I made the video on Instagram about pooping in labor. And when I made this video, I still didn't even know. Of course, I had pooped in labor. I didn't even know, though, because my husband was my poop ninja. He came and just like apparently wiped it right off of my butthole. I didn't even know, honestly. Like, he kept putting like this warm rag on my lower back, which felt so great during those contractions where I was kind of like leaning over the bed, standing over the bed, and he would warm up this washcloth and put it on my lower back. And that was beautiful. Like, I didn't even ask him to do that. I didn't know where he came up with that, but how funny, right? That he swiped my poop away and I didn't even know. And after this video to my husband, I was like, I know I'm making this video for all the women, right? Like that, it's okay. You're probably going to poop in labor, but it's funny because I didn't poop in labor. And he went, yeah, you did. I just think that's so sweet that I never even knew that I pooped and my husband swiped my poop away for me. Thanks. Gosh, I love him so much. Anywho, so then the OB kind of like finishes pulling him out of me, and she and my husband kind of pass my baby between my legs to me. And then I reach up and grab him and I see right away that it's a boy. So we didn't know. And I right away looked at my mom and said, I did it, Mom. I did it. I did it. I couldn't stop saying, I did it. I did it. And, yeah, that was the single most transformative, beautiful, incredible, amazing thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. And feeling my baby come out of me, feeling the fullness of labor, even though there were points when I thought I didn't want to anymore, like, praise the Lord, like I did. And I could do it just like every other woman who's come before me and so many women who will come after me. And I realized, whoa, I feel like I can do anything. I feel like if I can do that, I can do anything. And I realized so many women are just being so cheated out of fearing this experience, first of all, but also in handing it over willingly because they don't even realize how crucial and how important and how good and how holy and how incredible it is to not step away from the sensations of birth, to not opt out of the experience, to just do it. This embodied knowing you feel after that, there's nothing like that. It's an irreplaceable experience. There's nothing like birthing a baby. And it was so, so different from the experience I'd had, pushing on my back with my first baby. Just felt there was no dignity, there was no, I've said this too, like there was no eruption of joy when I met my first baby. Of course, I was excited to see him, but it not in the same hormonal way that I was to meet my second baby after that labor, after that intensity, after all of that. There's no comparing that to anything else. And women are really missing it out. They're missing out. They're so missing out because we're supposed to feel this. I really believe that women, I know, of course, there's always got to be a caveat. Sometimes there are real emergencies. Sometimes there are, like, praise the Lord, we have these interventions when we need them. But like, there are so many gifts to receive from not opting out of a natural physiological labor and birth. And right away, he cries and the baby nurses were a little bit concerned that he was a little gurgly, but I knew he was fine. I just knew babies take a little time to transition. Like, it's fine. We're here. We're good, and everything's okay. And lactation this time around, so, so much better, so much easier. Like, I have said this, like, just pouring out colostrum after, like, he nursed like a champ. Like, he was awake. He was so eager to nurse. And that remains true. Like, he's at 18 months, an eager nurser and an eager eater. Like, he just eats so much food. So, but anyway, nursing was easy. Nursing was just, I know there was a learning curve too, because I'd already nursed a newborn before. So I'd already had that experience. Clearly the physiological difference was that my body just sent my milk right in. Like, my hormonal sequence was not disrupted by an epidural or Pitocin. And so it just came in like a flood, which was so relieving and so wonderful to get to nourish my baby that way. Yeah. So back to the birth. So he was born. They thought he was a little gurgly. I knew he was fine. And I am so grateful, because imagine going into the hospital, like, I'm a free birther, right? No appointments, like, never, they don't know who I am at this hospital, right? And they're like, what is this woman doing here? I think when I met a pediatrician later, and she's like, so what happened? Like, are you guys from out of town? Like, we don't have any records for you. I have a feeling that these people kind of knew the kind of woman they were dealing with, and they knew not to mess with me a little bit, you know? Right after the birth, because there really were like 7 or 8 people all around. And I was squatting next to the bed, and thankfully everybody did step away for a minute while I held him there for a couple minutes. Finally, I end up like getting into the hospital bed to just kind of sit down for a second and transition with him. And I know that my kind of cortisol was spiking because of all these people around me, and I wasn't sure what they were going to do or say. And given that I didn't have any history there. And yeah, so I remember letting the nurses that were standing next to me kind of vigorously rub him, even though I knew my baby was okay. We are okay. And I could have just as easily rubbed him, but they insisted on rubbing him. And it's funny because somebody else on the podcast before has said women kind of negotiate which abuses they're willing to take, if you will. And so I didn't want to be too confrontational or resistant to what they wanted to do, because I didn't want them to take my baby from me. And I just didn't know kind of what they would do, So I let them rub him, even though I knew he was okay and I knew I was fine. And we just needed a minute. We were just literally coming back to earth. I'd seen enough home births to know that we were fine. And he was beautiful, transitioning beautifully. But again, like, I let them rub him because I was afraid if I didn't, what would happen? What would they try to insist was happening? And anyway, so finally they kind of all start to trickle out. But the OB was like, with all due respect, you're bleeding quite a lot. And she like reaches for my umbilical cord, and I'm sitting there on the bed, kind of knees apart and holding my baby. And I had to block her hand. I had to block her hand from touching my placenta and my vulva and my, umbilical cord. My placenta wasn't emerging yet, but I had to block her hand. And I actually have a little video of this. The only video I got from my whole birth. Thankfully, my mom happened to be taking like a live photo at the time. So I got this actual snippet of her saying, you're bleeding quite a lot, and reaching for me. And I block her hand and I say, I feel fine. I'm going to wait for the placenta, or something like that. No, thank you. I'm okay. I'm going to wait for the placenta. And I'm not kidding you. This OBGYN rips off her gown. She doesn't say anything. She has this like pissed off look on her face for saying this. Rips off her gown, throws it into the garbage can, opens the door. I never see her again. Like, she just walks out of the room without a word. And all because I just didn't want, I knew I was okay. I know, again, I was a planned free birth, so I knew what a postpartum hemorrhage might look like. I knew what I might feel like if I was hemorrhaging. I was 0% concerned about my placenta or my blood loss. And I was ready for my blood. I was ready to lose blood. I knew that that's a normal part of birth. I was ready for that to happen, and I was ready to birth my placenta on my own. And that really must have triggered her. I don't know. And again, they're just not used to women wanting to be in control of their births. And it takes a lot to have to go in there and navigate that. And it's just, that's what you're going to get in the hospital. And I was not confrontational. I just said, no, thank you. I feel okay. I'm going to wait for the placenta. I have a video of it. I think I'm going to post that on Instagram eventually. And this woman rips the gown off, scowls at me, and walks out. So then thankfully everybody leaves. Two nurses stay behind. And thankfully I did feel contractions start pretty quickly after that. I want to say maybe 10 minutes after he was born. I felt so cool birthing my placenta. I was holding my baby, and I felt like this was all instinctive. There was no need to think about how this was going to go. I just knew, okay, I knew I wanted to stand up. So I got off the bed and stood next to the bed, and I was standing there. And the nurse very condescendingly was like, do not pull on your cord. Like, she was talking to me like I was a child. And I was like, okay, sure. I just didn't even say anything to her. But I could feel my placenta detaching. I could feel it moving down lower. I knew I could do, as the doctor might do, the manual cord traction, if you want to call it that. And I just kind of guided my placenta out. I did tug a little bit, actually. And I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid to tug on it. I knew it was strong. I knew it. My body was telling me, walking me through this entire thing, I knew what I was doing was okay for me. And so they just held the bowl. She kept telling me not to pull on it, and I still kept pulling on it. And then they held the bowl for me, and my placenta just flopped right into the bowl. And much to their surprise, probably. I don't know if they've ever done a placenta birth like that, but that was amazing. It was just so normal. It was just such like a bodily function. And that's, as I reflect now on this birth, I realize again, even though it was hard and painful, it was just a bodily function. Like, my body knew what it was doing. There was no coaching necessary. There was no aside from the beautiful suggestions from my mom and my husband of like, oh, maybe just like move a little bit, try a little squat, and the warm rag, that was beautiful support. But my body just did the thing. Like, there was nothing it's hard, and it's hard to stay the course when it's hard. And I've had an epidural, so I know that you can just get an epidural and separate yourself from all those sensations. But I knew that I didn't want to do that. This was an incredible learning experience for me. And I actually am praise the Lord that this happened, because now so many women come to me wanting to know how to have a natural hospital birth. And even though that wasn't what I was intending, I inadvertently learned exactly how to do it. I know exactly how to have a natural hospital birth. And there is kind of a formula. And that's exactly what my sister and I, she's a labor and delivery nurse, but she's also had her own birth, and it was a home birth. So she's a home birthing labor and delivery nurse. And you have me, who's had, now these 2 birth experiences. So we're putting together this beautiful guide called Reclaimed 30 Days to Natural Hospital Birth. And it is the blueprint to natural hospital birth, if that's something that you want to do. And yeah, I'm really, really excited for you guys to get that. It's going to be, I think, really helpful. It's everything I didn't know before going into my second birth. And it's everything that I needed to know in order to have the kind of birth that I did have there. I'm really excited for that to come out soon, very soon, within the next couple of weeks. Thank you for tuning in and listening to my birth stories. It is such an honor and a joy to be here, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to Your Redemptive Birth. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave a review on your listening platform to help this podcast reach the women it needs to reach. If you have a redemptive birth story you would like to share, please email me at sarah@yourredemptivebirth.com. I would love to hear from you. Let's spread the redemptive birth word together.